And then they claim the following in Fortran manual: the amount of knowledge necessary to utilize the 704 effectively by means of Fortran is far less than the knowledge required to make the effective use of 704 by direct coding. And by direct coding, they meant writing octal programs. It will be possible to make the full capabilities of the 704 available to a much wider range of people than would otherwise be possible without expensive and time-consuming training programs. And therefore, IBM was very interested if more and more people could use the IBM 704 machine. IBM makes big business, and therefore IBM had supported this program. And these two claims indeed turned out to be true. And then there's another claim: Fortran may apply complex, lengthy techniques in coding a problem which the human coder would have neither the time nor inclination to derive or apply. Yes, it took away a lot of drudgery and used many interesting techniques. And the final claim: Fortran will virtually eliminate coding and debugging. We know that we spend a lot of time coding and debugging, but remember, at that time, coding and debugging was coding in octal or assembly program and debugging an assembly program, and that indeed was eliminated. Okay, if you're talking about today's era, replace IBM 704 by your favorite multi-core processors. Replace complex, lengthy techniques by scheduling for parallel computing, and imagine a language for it. That is what John Backus and his team were. That was the situation they were in way back in 1954. So what were the limitations of Fortran language? I'm talking about Fortran 1 language. There were no reserved words. Tokenization ignored spaces. So very funny. In order to save memory, they didn't have spaces separating the words or the things appearing in the program. In fact, for a long time, we would write Fortran program with spaces in it, and there would be a preprocessor that would remove the spaces, and then the whole thing will be sent to a scanner. They're very simplistic functions, built-in functions, no subprograms, no recursion. Is there a question? Is there a raised hand? Is there a message? I'm not keeping track of the messages. Okay, there is for someone else. Okay, so someone will have to, I'm focusing on my slide, so someone will have to draw my attention by unmuting and telling me. Okay, and Fortran 1 had do loops with limited nesting depth of 3. Just imagine you can write a for loop with a nesting depth of only 3. And they were implicit type based on first letter. So I, J, K, L, M, N were integers and everything else was real. If your first letter was I, J, K, L, M, N, the first letter of the variable that you're using was I, J, K, L, M, N, that it was integer, otherwise it was real. And there was no type declaration required because types were implicit. And minor errors could be rather expensive. So first American Venus probe was lost because of a computer problem. A programmer replaced a comma by a dot. And this is interesting. Let me reduce the size of this. So the original statement was this: do 3, I equal to 1 to 3. So 3 is a statement number. From this statement until statement number 3, repeat for the values of I going from 1 to 3, and this was replaced by do 3I 1, and instead of comma the programmer happened to put a dot there, and because the spaces didn't matter, what was essentially a do loop became an assignment statements. D3 do 3I do 3I equal to 1.3, and the loop didn't exist, and therefore the Venus probe met with a disaster. This was a big problem in the programming language. There were interesting things. Okay, so a provision to override the default types was added later, and there were no reserved words. So default types, because there was no type declaration, the interesting thing was people said that Fortran was a divine language because God is real unless declared integer, because the word God begins with G, and everything that begins with G is real. So people used to joke that God is real unless declared integer. And there were no reserved words. So you could write a statement like this: if less than then else equal to then, else then equal to else. This was a very valid statement in Fortran. Imagine how difficult things would be. So there was no attention paid to language design. Okay, and contribution of Fortran, one compiler were phase-wise division of work, and they introduced the following optimizations. Common sub-expression elimination that we saw. And I think at that time it was restricted to within a basic block, but they introduced the notion of a basic block. They introduced the notion of a control flow graph. And they talked about array address optimization and loops, which is nothing but strength reduction and induction variable elimination, although it was not called that way. And they introduced register allocation using hierarchical regions. And later it was proved that their algorithm was optimal under the number of loads for straight line code. So register allocation, strength reduction, common sub-expression elimination, these are still the optimization that are used by a compiler. And they use basic blocks and execution frequency analysis. This is something that feedback directed compilers or profile guided compilers do. And they were the first to make a distinction between pseudo registers and hard registers. So in this course, you would have studied register allocation, and you would have seen that initially we assume that there's an infinite number of registers, and then those registers are through graph coloring or some other method mapped to hard registers. This concept, although not using graph coloring, but this concept, this distinction that you could assume there is a set of infinite registers, and then you somehow do a mapping of that infinite registers to the real registers. This is something that was introduced by Fortran 1 compiler, very first compiler in 1957. Okay. But the interesting thing is about algebraic expressions. So there were other algebraic compilers needed parentheses for expressions. There was no parsing. We didn't have grammars. Knuth had not invented LR grammars. LL grammars were not invented at that point of time. So we didn't have a formal statement of syntax of program. And that's why you would support statements like if then else with if then not being keywords. So if you had this expression A plus B star star, see where star star is a way of writing exponentiation operation, which would have a higher precedence. So I'm talking about this star star. This is exponentiation. So this expression tree looks like this. You're adding A to the multiplication of D plus E and B raised to C. And this required the syntax to be given like this. So if you want to write a complex expression, you have to give these brackets by other compilers, but Fortran didn't need it. And that's a very beautiful thing that I wish to spend some time on. So there were rules of expression that were written. You can see that some kind of lexical rules are described here. We're not interested in looking at these rules, but we're interested in how Fortran handled expressions. I found this something very, very nice and very beautiful. Okay, and they had this set of rules. The set of rules basically said that there were 3 levels of precedences of plus, star, and raised to operator, and they would replace every plus by this, every star by this, and every raised to operation by this. Add this in the beginning of the expression and add these 3 things at the end of the expression. Why 3? Because we have 3 levels of precedences. So how does it work? So let's take our example expression. Let's say this was the expression that we take. So this expression becomes fully parenthesized by application of this this rule. How? So initially you say, oh sorry, I wanted to, yeah. So initially you say add 3 brackets in the beginning of the expression. So you did that. and then at the start of every expression, so you would put them here as well, and then at the end of every expression, which is here, and by here I mean here, and then we would have them here as well. So we would have them here as well. So this finishes the first two rules, and then we say replace every plus by these three things. So this is the rule that we apply to this plus. So what do we get? We get this. Okay, and then replace every star by star with two brackets around it. So replace every star, and remember this is not star, this is star star, exponentiation operation. So we have this star which we replace by this, and now finally put a single bracket here, and we get this, and this big expression becomes fully parenthesized. No parsing required, and yet they were able to create effectively a parse tree or an expression tree out of this expression. And interestingly, this was done with a single linear left to right scan of expressions. When I found this, when I read this, I found it to be very, very beautiful. This shows how inventive the team was. Okay, and then there were several anecdotes related to Fortran. So expression computation problem observed by Bernard Galler. For n equal to 10, the expression n multiplied by n minus 1 by 2 computed 40 instead of 45. This was very funny. And that is because division had a higher precedence. And 9 by 2 is 4 in integer arithmetic. So if we were to do multiplication first, so we would have 10 multiplied by 9, 90, which then divided by 2 would give us 45. But because division had a higher precedence, this operation was done first. So n minus 1 is 9, and 9 divided by 2 is 4. So you get 4 as integer arithmetic. Okay. And this problem was brought to the notice of IBM that, look, it doesn't give us the expected result. So the response from IBM was, it is too complicated to change the compiler, so we will fix the manual. You know, this is how most managements would solve problems. Okay. And the new manual indeed had the following statement. Please be warned that mathematical equivalence is not the same as computational equivalence. So the question is, how about same precedences for divides by this and left associativity? So I will leave that exercise for you. Try out some expressions and see for yourself that indeed there would be some other expression where this problem would still persist, and there indeed is issue because of difference between integer division truncating the fractional part of it. Okay. There's another interesting anecdote on compiler reliability. It stored tables on magnetic drums. So there was drum-based memory, and so magnetic drum and drum would rotate. This is something like the disks that we have, not the SSDs, but the rotating disks. That's why they are called disks. They rotate, and we read parts of the disk. So tables were stored in that magnetic drum-based memory, and there was slow searches and load more drums and more load on the drums. So compiler worked far better at General Motors than at Westinghouse, because GM people had ensured a much better servicing of magnetic drums. In particular, their maintenance people would, on every holiday, every weekend, they would oil the shaft on which the drums rotated. So just imagine you sitting with an oil can on your laptop to increase the speed of your laptop. That was a funny situation that we were in. And then there was another interesting anecdote where Frank Engel at Westinghouse observed that the tapes moved independently but sequentially. And he realized that compiler would become faster if tape movement is made to overlap. If there's independent, why do it sequentially? We could as well do it concurrently. So Frank asked for the source code, and source meant source in the assembly, because that was the thing that will compile a program into assembly, and it was written in assembly. I mean, they didn't have the vision of writing Fortran compiler in Fortran at that point of time, the way we do now. A C compiler is written in C. So Frank asked for the source and got a reply, source as in assembly. IBM does not supply source code. Why would IBM reveal its source code? Why would IBM let out its secret? So Frank patched up the octal code of the compiler, and the throughput increased by a factor of 3. IBM was very surprised and wanted a copy. So Frank said, Westinghouse does not supply object code. Okay, now we want to talk about a Fortran program for array copy. And we still are 5 minutes away from the break. What I will do is I will merely introduce the problem to you, and I will give its solution and how they arrived at the solution after the break. So this was a simple program. Dimension A 10 10 means we are declaring a 2-dimensional array which is 10 by 10. B was also a 2-dimensional array which was 10 by 10. And it was simply, the task was simply to copy the elements, the values in the elements of B into the corresponding elements in A. That is what the problem. So you had 2 nested loops. So one is the statement number. Do until 1 from j equal to 1 to 10. So from this onwards, this, do this, repeat these two things, repeat these two statements for j equal to 1 to 10. And the next statement would say, repeat this statement for I equal to 1 to 10, which means that this was a nested loop. Note that we had j before I. That's because Fortran stored arrays in a column major form, not the row major form. Meaning column moved faster than the row. Or rather, row moved faster. So let's look at this, how it looks. So we have this, we show a simplified view for a 4 by 3 fragment. So this is B11, B12, B13, the usual representation that we have. Okay. So here we have, this is row 21, 22. Okay. And how would the elements move? How were they stored in the memory? In what sequence was the copy done? So the first element B11 will be copied to B11. And the next element would be B21 and not B12 as we would imagine. In a row major format, the elements in a row moved faster. Here, elements in a column were finished before you move on to the next column. Okay, so rows. So this is, you have to understand the words. When I say rows moved slower, it doesn't mean for one column you moved a row. So in that sense, row moved faster and column moves slower. But the whole idea is you finish all elements of one column before you move on to the next column. Whereas in modern languages, we finish all elements of one row before we move on to the next row. Okay, so this is how the copy would happen. Okay, and there's this notion of address calculation. I don't know whether it's been covered somewhere, but the idea is that every cell has a certain address. So we're talking about this particular cell. And how do you compute the address of this cell? So this is a 10 by 10 array, and you are storing j minus 1 columns before this, the column of this. So therefore, you would multiply j minus 1 by 10, and this was the ith row. So you do I minus 1. Of course, there's an off by 1 issue here. We'll worry about that later. But Conceptually, let's assume that this address begins with 1. So you had I minus 1 elements here before this, and therefore this is the address in the memory of the expression of this particular element. Base plus j minus 1 star 10 plus I minus 1. Okay. So the additional complication was in Fortran, arrays are stored backwards and index registers are subtracted from the base, but let's not worry too much about it at this stage. What I will do here is now I will stop here. After the break, I will show you the source program, the target program, and explain what optimizations they did. And then we will look at what modern compilers do about these problems. So I will pause here and take questions if you have any. When we are really talking about a story, so I don't know if you have any questions, but if you do have questions, please feel free to ask. Either type on chat, because now I am looking at the chat, or unmute yourself and ask.
Sir, I have a question, but I don't know if it's more suitable for the panel discussion in the evening.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Sure. So I really enjoyed this presentation. I really like your point that the team which designed Fortran was inexperienced. And
Yes.
because they were inexperienced, they simply did not understand that what they were trying to solve was impossible. Right?
Yes. Yes.
And the second, I think one more beautiful thing was that compilers had not yet been invented. So people, the experts, thought that it was impossible to do that.
Right.
And so it turns out that this team was in the right place and at the right time to do the impossible thing.
Yes, yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So it's my question is that what do you think is the right place and the right time for the next big thing in systems, in compilers?
We will come to that. I mean, this whole talk is about that. So that will be the high point of this talk. And after the break, we will indeed talk about it. How did they compile their compiler? There was no compiler before this. So this brings in the issue of bootstrapping of a compiler. And I have a set of interesting slides there. I can spend half an hour on explaining this, but let me answer that question very briefly right now. So for them, the problem was simpler because they didn't write their compiler in a high-level language. A high-level language didn't exist. They wrote their compilers in assembly language. But this issue arises when we have to write a compiler in a high-level language. So this is called bootstrapping. Imagine that you come up with a new processor, a brand new processor on which no compiler exists. Then how do you get the first compiler there? So the idea is you first write an assembler in machine language and then rewrite the assembler in the assembly language, make it more powerful, add more features to it, and keep raising the features of the language that you support until you reach the source language. So this is called bootstrapping. So bootstrapping is something that we need to do for new processors for which no compilers exist. The other alternative is to actually write a cross compiler. So if I were to design a new processor, I will design a new processor. I don't have any software running on it, but I have some other computer. On that computer, I can write a compiler which will generate code written for the new processor. And all I have to do is to load this code on that processor. I mean, this is exactly what happens in my compiler construction course, where people write a compiler for MIPS or they run it using SPIM simulator, but all of them their laptops are running i386 machines. So you are writing a compiler that runs on i386 but generates code for MIPS. So that's called cross compiler. So cross compilation and bootstrapping are two techniques whereby we can get compilers on new processors. Shreya, I hope this answers your question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So I'm sorry I delayed a bit I delayed starting a bit. I was a bit greedy. I had a nice slide idea and I would put it on those slides, and I needed just 5 more minutes to complete those slides. I used a half an hour break to complete my set of slides. Okay, so let's come back to this. So this is the way we access an element I comma j. Okay, so let's look at the program that they wrote. What is happening? Oh, I'm not moving on my impressive screen. Yes. Yes. So this is the program. This was the source program and this was the target program. This CLA is clear and load accumulator. This is a way of loading a value in a register. And let's not worry too much about it. Basically, these are some machine instructions of IBM 704. Without getting into the machine instructions, the interesting thing to observe here is that there is one single loop. So loop until this. So this says loop back to loop from. So go transfer the control to this label called loop for 1 to 100. So this is the explanation. So this is a singly nested loop. So we don't see doubly nested loop, and we don't see multiplication by the size of the integer. We don't see array address calculation. So we don't see this expression appearing anywhere. So there is a straightforward array copy program, and this was a program that was generated by Fortran compiler. And we want to see how did they get this compiler. Okay. So we talked about strength reduction. When I introduced data flow analysis, I talked about strength reduction. So let's write a naive code for this. The naive code for this is I equal to 1, j equal to 1, and then there's a nested loop. There's a repeat until loop. So you are going to do this array address calculation. So you have this expression base. So you will do j minus 1 into star plus I minus 1. So this is the temporary T1. And then you will subtract it, do something to get the base and increment I and copy the element. So this is T2 is where you will load the element to be copied. B is the base, and star of A of T minus 1 is equal to T2. So this is, so these two instructions essentially are doing this copy operation. Okay. So this is doubly nested loop. And how did they get a singly nested loop and no multiplication and nothing? So that's what we wish to see. Okay. So observations about inner loop. So what do we observe about the inner loop? Look at these two computations. Whenever I increments by 1, T1 also increments by 1 because T1 is equal to something plus I minus 1. Okay. So we can effectively initialize T1 outside the loop, outside of the inner loop, push it in the outside loop. We can initialize this for the value I equal to 1. So we say j minus 1 into 10 plus I minus 1, and I is equal to 1. So this becomes 0. So this is j minus 1, and increment T1 within the loop by 1. So this is strength reduction. We are replacing, pushing the multiplication outside and replacing it by addition within the loop. So we get this computation now. T1 is incremented by 1. Okay. Now we make another observation. Whenever j increments by 1, here T1 increments by 10. Okay. So because this is j increments by 1, this is multiplied by 10. So T1 increments by 10. Okay. So we can once again repeat the whole thing. We can initialize T1 outside of the loop and increment it within the loop by 10. Okay, so T1 is equal to j minus 1. For j equal to 1, this becomes 0. So we simply say T1 equal to 0 and do T1 equal to T1 plus 10. So this is how our loop becomes. However, the inner loop has already incremented T1 by 10. Because this executes 10 times, so T1 is already incremented 10 times. So what we essentially do is, we do not insert anything, we simply say T1 equal to 0 and get rid of the thing happening here. Okay. Now we observe that the only activity in the outer loop is to control the loop iterations. The value of j, if you see, j is being incremented here, but j is not being used anywhere in the loop. So all it is doing is, it is ensuring that this inner loop, once it inner loops, its inner loop is finishes, we repeat this 10 times of inner loops 10 times. So essentially what we can do is, we can combine the loops into a single loop by taking a product of the two loop bounds, and variable I and j would not be required. So this is the eventual program that we have. We simply say T1 equal to 0, T2 is equal to load of this, and this is store of this, and increment T1 by 1, and of course you do checks on these branches. Okay, and that's exactly the code that they have generated. There's no difference. This is the code that they have generated. So imagine such a sophisticated optimization that was done by the first Fortran compiler. There are of course minor differences. In assembly language, base is b+1, initial value of T1 is 1, etc., etc. But let's keep aside. The whole idea is to show the array address calculation can disappear and doubly nested loop can disappear. So when I read about this program, this was explained by Frances Ellen in one of her interesting papers. And I like the idea a lot. So I wanted to see, what do modern compilers do? So I did this experiment 3 years ago. So I wrote the same program in Fortran and compiled it using GCC 4.7.2. Modern version of GCC is 8. I have not tried it with GCC 8. But 3 years ago is still much better than what happened in 1954. So I compiled it using gfortran. So integer is now 4 bytes. Efficient address calculation is done with strength reduction. So there is no multiplication instruction, as you can see here. In any of these instructions, we don't have multiplication. But the most interesting part is nested loops were still not flattened. And this is curious. So a compiler in 2018 was unable to do what a compiler in 1954 was doing. In 1954, Fortran compiler flattened the loop. This compiler did not flatten the loop. Okay. Of course, you could argue, why is it necessary to flatten the loop? So in modern days, flattening the loop is very important because if you have doubly nested loop, you have more control transfers, and then you have more instances of pipeline not being full, etc., etc. So let's not get into those details, but modern compiler doesn't do this. Of course, the program might still run efficiently, but we're just talking about the structure of the generated code. So does it mean that compilers have not made any progress? So that is not true. Compilers have indeed made a lot of progress, and what I'm going to do is, perhaps I might have to rush through the rest of the slides.